She was 8 years old when her stepmother trapped her and her brother in a freezer. Their father was a powerful mafia boss. Their cries were muffled by ice and steel, but I heard them. I was just the black maid. I wasn't supposed to matter, until the day I had to choose. Risk my life to save theirs or stay silent like everyone else. What would you do? My name is Grace Williams. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I never thought leaving my children would make me strong. I thought it would break me. But sometimes, love pushes us to do things we never imagined possible. It was a Tuesday morning when I made the hardest decision of my life. My daughter Maria was 10 years old. My son Lucas was 8. They were sitting at my mother's kitchen table in Atlanta, eating cereal, laughing about something on their phones. They didn't know yet that I was leaving. My mother had sat me down the night before. Grace, there's an opportunity. A live-in position in Seoul. The salary is triple what you make here. You could send money home. In 3 years maybe you could bring them over. Or maybe you could come back. 3 years felt like a lifetime. But I looked at my children's shoes held together with duct tape. I looked at the eviction notice on the refrigerator. I looked at Maria's report card, brilliant, perfect, but our address listed as unstable. And I made the choice that would change everything. I'll do it, I told my mother. I'll go. Maria didn't understand when I told her. She cried for 3 hours straight. Lucas asked if I was mad at him. My mother held me while I packed, and neither of us spoke because if we had, I would have stayed. And I couldn't stay. I loved them too much to stay. The plane ticket cost everything I had saved. The visa paperwork took 2 weeks. The orientation happened in a cold office in downtown Seoul where I sat with 17 other women. Filipino, Indonesian, Nigerian. All of us mothers, all of us terrified. All of us determined to change our lives by leaving. You will be invisible, the administrator told us. That is your job. To serve, to clean, to cook, and to never be seen. Do you understand? We nodded. We understood. We had no choice. The house sat above the Han River in Seoul, perched like a bird of prey over the city. Modern architecture. Everything glass and marble and cold light. Everything expensive. Everything empty. When I first walked through those doors, I understood why the job paid so much. This wasn't a home. This was a monument to power. This was what wealth looked like when it had no heart. A woman met me in the foyer. Her name was Isabella Martinez. She was stunning, the kind of beautiful that stops traffic, that makes women hate her on sight, that makes men forget their own names. She was tall, model thin, wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Her hair fell in perfect waves. Her makeup was immaculate. Her smile was absolutely, completely fake. You're the new maid, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. I'm Grace Williams. Grace. She said my name like it was a joke. Well, Grace, let me explain how this house works. I am Isabella Martinez. I am Mr. Park's fiancée. Soon I will be Mrs. Park. When I am, this house will run according to my standards. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. She handed me an iPad. On the screen was a list: rules, restrictions, prohibitions. No touching anything that doesn't belong to you. No eye contact with Mr. Park unless he speaks to you first. No speaking to the children without permission. No phone calls during working hours. No guests. No going anywhere in this house except the kitchen, the laundry room, and your small room on the 4th floor. You eat alone. You sleep alone. You are invisible. That is the job. That is what you agreed to do. Can you do that? I looked at the list. 47 rules. 47 ways I was not supposed to exist in this space. Yes, ma'am. I can do that. Good. Your room is 4th floor, East Wing. The family lives on the 2nd floor, West Wing. You are not to go there unless explicitly told. Breakfast is at 7 in the morning. Lunch at noon. Dinner at 8 in the evening. You will prepare all meals. You will clean all common areas. You will do all laundry. You will do this invisibly, quietly, without being asked. If I see you, if I hear you, if I notice you exist at any point, we will have a problem. Is that clear? I thought about Maria. I thought about Lucas. I thought about the eviction notice on my mother's refrigerator. Yes, ma'am. That's very clear. She walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. I stood alone in the foyer holding my small suitcase and I cried. Not because I was sad. Because I was terrified. Because I had just left my children with my mother for this. Because I had promised them I would make this worth it, and I was already breaking. That night, I lay on a small bed in a small room with a window that looked out at a brick wall. No view. No light. Just confinement. I pulled out my phone and looked at pictures of Maria and Lucas. Their faces glowed in the darkness. I made a silent promise to them. I would work hard. I would send money home. I would make this sacrifice mean something. In 3 years I would bring them here. Or I would go home. Either way we would be together again. I didn't know yet that everything would fall apart. I didn't know yet that I would meet 2 children who would change everything. I didn't know yet that I would have to choose between my job and their lives. 3 days into my employment I heard laughter. Real laughter. Not polite laughter. Not adult laughter. The kind of laughter that belongs to children who don't yet understand that the world is full of pain. The kind of laughter that makes you remember why you keep living. I was scrubbing the kitchen floor on my hands and knees. My back was aching. My hands were raw from cleaning solution. I had already worked 12 hours. I still had 4 more hours ahead of me. Dinner preparation, laundry, deep cleaning of the marble bathrooms. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Running footsteps. Giggling. 2 children ran past the kitchen entrance. A boy and a girl. The boy was about 8 years old. The girl was about 6. They were beautiful, mixed heritage, with dark eyes and serious expressions that suggested they had learned too early that beauty and safety were not the same thing. The boy stopped running and looked at me. He studied me carefully like he was trying to figure out if I was real or a ghost. "You're new," he said. I sat back on my heels and wiped my hands on a towel. I was supposed to be invisible. But this boy was looking directly at me. "I am," I said. "My name is Grace." "What's your name?" "Daniel," he said. "That's Sophia. She doesn't really talk to people she doesn't know. She can talk. She just doesn't like to." Sophia was standing behind Daniel, peeking out from around his shoulder. She had the same dark eyes as Daniel, but hers held something else. A wariness, a guardedness that suggested she had learned that people couldn't be trusted. "Nice to meet you both," I said, smiling. I tried to make it a real smile, not the fake smile I use for Isabella. "I'm going to be living here and helping take care of the house. I hope we can be friends." Daniel whispered something to Sophia. Sophia whispered back. They seemed to come to some kind of agreement. "Okay," Daniel said. "You can be our friend. But you have to promise you won't leave like the others did." My heart cracked. I didn't know what he meant. I didn't know about the other nannies, the other housekeepers, the revolving door of women who had come and gone from this house. I just knew that this small boy was asking me for a promise. "I promise," I said. "I won't leave." It was a promise I didn't understand yet. A promise I would have to keep with every fiber of my being. Over the next few weeks, I learned about Daniel and Sophia's lives. They lived in a mansion but were essentially imprisoned. Their mother had left when Daniel was 3 and Sophia was still a baby. No one spoke about her. It was like she had been erased from history. Minjun, their father, was rarely home. I would see him occasionally. A tall man with cold eyes and the kind of presence that made everyone in a room nervous. He always looked sad, like he was carrying weight that no person should have to carry. I later learned he ran one of Seoul's most powerful criminal organizations. But to me, he was just a father who was absent most of the time, leaving his children in the care of Isabella. Isabella had moved into the house about 6 months before I arrived. According to whispered conversations I overheard, Minjun had met her at some high-end club. She was beautiful, sophisticated, mysterious. He had fallen for her hard. He had made her his fiancée almost immediately. He had brought her into his home. And she had begun to destroy his children from the inside out. One evening while I was preparing dinner, Daniel came into the kitchen. He looked around first to make sure Isabella wasn't nearby. He had learned to be careful. "Do you like Isabella?" he asked me. I chose my words carefully. I had learned this skill from years of working in other people's homes. How to navigate the complicated emotions of employers and their families without getting caught in the crossfire. "She seems nice," I said. Daniel laughed. It was a bitter sound for an 8-year-old. "She's not nice. She's mean. She tells us we're in her way. She says she's going to send us to boarding school. Far away. Somewhere where we won't bother her and Daddy anymore. My heart broke. She's probably just adjusting. New families take time to adjust to each other. She's not our family, Daniel said quietly, with a certainty that broke my heart even more. She's trying to erase our family. She talks about our mom all the time. She calls her bad names. She tells Daddy that Mom was a bad woman and that's why she left. She tells us that we're bad children. She says if we really loved Daddy we would stop being so sad. Sophia appeared in the doorway then. She didn't speak. She just came and wrapped her arms around Daniel. I knelt down and pulled them both into my arms. I held them there, these two children who weren't mine but who had somehow become mine. And I made a silent promise. These children will not be alone. Not while I'm here. That night I started spending time with them whenever Isabella was out. I taught them songs I had learned from my own mother. I braided Sophia's hair and told her stories about Atlanta. About my own children. About the world beyond this cold mansion. I helped Daniel with his homework. I listened to his dreams of becoming a doctor. I told them about Maria and Lucas. I told them about the apartment in Atlanta where we lived. I told them about my mother. I told them about the love I carried for them every single moment of every single day, thousands of miles away. When will you see them again? Daniel asked one day as we sat together in the garden behind the mansion. When I save enough money, I said honestly. Maybe 1 more year. Maybe 2. That's a long time, Sophia whispered. I know, I said. But I'm doing it for them. Everything I do here is for them. Just like I'm doing everything I can for you too. Because that's what we do for the people we love. We sacrifice. We wait. We do whatever it takes. I didn't know that those words would become my philosophy. I didn't know that I would have to live by them in ways I couldn't imagine. She noticed the way Daniel ran to me when he got home from school. She noticed the way Sophia's face lit up when I walked into a room. She noticed the love blooming between me and 2 children who weren't mine. And her jealousy became a living, breathing thing. It grew in her chest. It spread through her veins. It consumed her thoughts. She began to see me as a threat. Not just as a maid. As competition. As a woman who was taking her place in the children's hearts. One afternoon, I was sorting laundry in the linen room when Isabella found me. I didn't hear her approach. When she spoke, it was a shock that made my entire body go rigid. I see you've been spending time with the children, she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that precedes a storm. Just helping them with homework, ma'am, I said respectfully. I didn't turn around. I kept my hands busy with the laundry. They don't need a mother figure, Isabella said. She stepped closer. I could smell her perfume. Expensive, overwhelming, trying to cover something rotten underneath. They have me now. That's my role. That's my place. Grace says nothing. Silence is safer than words. Do you understand what I'm saying? Isabella stepped even closer. I could feel her breath on the back of my neck. I had learned to recognize the signs of danger. This woman was dangerous. Yes, ma'am, I said quietly. Say it back to me, Isabella demanded. Tell me what I'm saying. I turned to face her. And in that moment I looked at Isabella. Really looked at her. Beneath the makeup, beneath the designer clothes, beneath the fury, Isabella was terrified. Isabella was broken. Isabella was a woman who had been hurt by something or someone, and had decided to hurt others to feel less alone. You're saying that I'm staff. I clean. I cook. I don't get to matter to them. I don't get to be their friend. I don't get to fill the space their mother left, I said quietly. But I didn't mean it. And somehow Isabella knew I didn't mean it. It was written all over my face. The refusal to diminish the love I felt for those children. The determination to be there for them no matter what. If I find out you've been alone with them again, I will have you deported, Isabella said coldly. I will tell your employer, and I have that power, that you stole from this house. I will destroy you. Do you understand? Grace looked into Isabella's eyes and saw the truth. Isabella would do exactly what she said. Isabella had the power. Isabella had the resources. And Isabella had the cruelty to follow through. I understand, ma'am, I said. That night I cried in my small room. I cried for those children. I cried for myself. I cried for the impossible situation I was in. I loved these children. I could not leave them. But now I knew that staying might cost me everything. I also knew I didn't have a choice. Some things are worth any cost. The next morning everything changed. Isabella came to find me while I was doing laundry. She brought her phone and played a recording. A conversation between me and Daniel about his mother, about the stories I had told him, about the love his parents had shared before she left. "I've been hearing reports," Isabella said conversationally, "that you've been teaching the children inappropriate behaviors, telling them stories about their mother, making them sad, encouraging them to disobey household rules." "That's not true, ma'am," I said. My hands were shaking. "The children were happy before you arrived," Isabella continued. "Now they're depressed. Now they're rebellious. Now they're crying every night. That's because of you. That's because you've poisoned them with your sad stories and your pitiful attempts at motherhood." I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to argue. But I had seen what Isabella was doing. This was the setup. This was the justification for what came next. Effective immediately, Isabella announced, "You're being moved to a smaller room. 4th floor, north wing. You're no longer allowed to help the children with meals. You're no longer allowed to enter their wing. You're no longer allowed to speak to them without permission. Clear?" "Yes, ma'am," I whispered, though nothing was clear anymore. "Good. You're dismissed." That afternoon, I was moved to an even smaller room, half the size of the previous one. Single bed, desk, window that looked out at a brick wall. No view, no light, only confinement. I sat on the bed and allowed myself 1 hour of despair. 1 hour where I cried so hard I could barely breathe. 1 hour where I questioned everything. 1 hour where I considered giving up. But then I thought about my children in Atlanta. I thought about Daniel and Sophia. I thought about the promise I had made. And I found my strength again. I left notes in Sophia's backpack. I taught Daniel a special knock, 2 quick raps, a pause, 1 more rap, so he could visit me in the kitchen when Isabella was out. One evening, Daniel came to me with red eyes from crying. "She said you don't like us anymore," he said. "She said you were just pretending to be our friend. She said real friends don't abandon people." My heart shattered. "That's not true, Daniel. I love you and Sophia. I would never leave you. Never." "Then why won't you come see us?" I had no answer that would fix this. So I held him while he cried. "I will always protect you," I whispered. "Always. No matter what. That's a promise I'm making to you right now. And I will keep it even if it costs me everything." I didn't know yet how much that promise would cost. Days turned into weeks. Isabella's cruelty increased exponentially. She stopped feeding the children regular meals. She told them they were getting too fat. She told them their mother was fat and lazy and that's why she left. She locked them in their rooms for hours as punishment for minor infractions. Forgetting to make their beds. Not finishing homework fast enough. Looking at her the wrong way. She made them stand in the corner while she described all the ways they were unwanted. All the ways they were mistakes. All the ways they had ruined their father's life. One day I found Daniel in the kitchen stealing food. His fingers were shaking. His eyes were hollow. He looked like a child made of shadows. "How long has this been happening?" I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it from his mouth. "I don't know," Daniel said. "A long time. I'm scared all the time. I think she hates us. I think she wants us to just disappear." I pulled him into my arms. I held him so tight I was afraid I might break him. But he needed to be held. He needed someone to anchor him to the world. He needed to know that he mattered. That his life had value. That he wasn't a mistake. "I'm going to do something about this," I said. "I promise you. I'm going to do something." I decided that night. I was going to tell Minjun. I knew it could cost me everything. I knew it could get me deported. I knew it could destroy me. But those children were dying. Slowly. Methodically. They were being destroyed by someone who should be protecting them. It was a Tuesday morning. Beautiful weather. Sun shining. The city was alive with possibility. Isabella came home furious. Apparently, Minjun had forgotten their dinner reservation. It was nothing. A simple mistake, a miscalculation, a moment of forgetfulness. But Isabella had decided to take it personally. She decided that this was proof that Minjun didn't love her, that he didn't prioritize her, that he was moving backward instead of forward. She found the children in the living room watching television. She clicked it off with such force that the remote flew across the room and hit the wall. "This is your fault," she told them, her voice dripping with venom. "If you weren't here, if you weren't such a burden, maybe your father would remember things. Maybe he'd care about me the way he should. Maybe he wouldn't be thinking about the past all the time." Daniel tried to leave the room. He could sense that something was about to happen. He had learned to recognize the signs of Isabella's rage. Isabella grabbed his arm. "Where are you going? I'm talking to you. Let him go." I stood in the doorway. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. Isabella's eyes flashed with rage. Pure, undiluted, primal rage. This is your doing. You've poisoned these children against me. You've turned them into ungrateful little brats who only think about the past. You've convinced them that I'm the enemy." "That's not true," I said. My voice was shaking but my words were steady. "I've only shown them kindness." "Kindness?" Isabella laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass, like something sharp tearing through the world. "You think you can replace me? You think you can be their mother? You're nothing. You're a maid. You're a ghost. You're a black woman who was discarded by her own country and shipped across the world because no one wanted you." The words hit like blows. But I stood firm. I didn't crumble. I didn't break. I may be a maid, but I'm not cruel to innocent children. I don't hurt people who can't defend themselves. So whatever you think of me, at least I know I'm a better person than that. Isabella's face transformed into something terrifying, something that wasn't entirely human anymore. It was the face of someone who had been defeated by words, and who would now destroy anyone who stood in her way. "Get out of my sight. Now, before I have you arrested for theft." I looked at the children. Sophia was crying silently. Daniel's face was pale with fear. That night I lay in my tiny room, and I knew the end was coming. I had crossed Isabella. I had made myself an enemy. I had defended those children at the cost of my own safety. The question was, when would the retaliation come? It was a Wednesday afternoon. The weather had turned gray and cold. The city seemed to be mourning something. Minjun had gone to work. Isabella was alone in the house with the children and me. I was in the kitchen when I heard it. Screaming. Not playful screaming. Not the screaming of children playing a game. Not the screaming of joy or excitement. Real screaming. Terror screaming. The screaming of children experiencing pain and fear beyond anything they had ever known. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I ran. I followed the sound to the basement. The door was locked. I pounded on it. "Let them out. Isabella, let them out." I heard Isabella's voice, cold and deliberate. "They're going to learn what it means to disobey. They're going to learn what it means to make me angry. They're going to learn what fear feels like." I slammed my body against the door. Once, twice, 3 times. The door didn't budge. I looked around and found a fire extinguisher. I used it to break the lock. The door swung open. Then I heard it. The sound of a heavy industrial freezer door slamming shut. The kind used to store meat for restaurants. The kind that locks from the outside. And then muffled screaming from inside the freezer. My world stopped. I ran to find my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called for help. I called the police. I gave the address. I begged them to hurry. 2 children locked in a freezer. I screamed into the phone. "Please come now. They're dying. Please, please hurry." I ran back to the basement and started kicking. Over and over. My feet hurt. My voice was raw from screaming. But I didn't stop. "Hold on. Hold on, I'm coming." She has no idea how long this goes on. Time becomes meaningless. There is only the freezer. There is only the muffled screaming. There is only the desperate need to break through this barrier and save the children on the other side. After what feels like an eternity but is only minutes, she finds a crowbar in the corner. She tries to pry open the freezer. It won't budge. Her hands are bleeding. She doesn't care. Then, Isabella appears behind her with a gun. "Step away," Isabella says calmly. Like she's not holding a weapon. Like she's not actively committing murder. No, I said. Step away or I'll shoot you. Then shoot me, I said. But I'm opening this freezer. I'm getting those children out. For a moment, the two women are frozen in absolute tension. Isabella's hand is steady. I have no weapon. I'm going to die. But then sirens. Police sirens. Getting closer. Getting louder. Isabella's face crumbles. The gun lowers. And in that second of weakness, I lunged and grabbed the key from Isabella's pocket. My hands worked frantically. The padlock came open. I tore open the freezer door. Daniel and Sophia were huddled in the corner. Their bodies pressed together for warmth. Their lips were blue. Their skin was pale. Their eyes were barely open. They looked like ghosts. They looked like they were already gone. But they were breathing. I pulled them out and wrapped them in my own body, trying to transfer my warmth. I was crying. I was screaming. I was calling 911, telling them to send an ambulance. I was holding them. I was telling them they were going to be okay. They were safe now. The police burst through the basement door moments later. Isabella was standing with her hands up, the gun on the ground. She was smiling. Not a smile of happiness. A smile of someone who had finally broken completely. The ambulance ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and flashing lights and paramedics shouting medical terms I didn't understand. Daniel and Sophia were strapped to gurneys, oxygen masks over their small faces, thermal blankets wrapped around their bodies, for lines running into their arms. Their lips were still blue. Their skin was still so pale it looked translucent. I sat in the ambulance holding Daniel's hand, and I kept talking to him even though I didn't know if he could hear me. You're going to be okay. Both of you are going to be okay. I'm right here. I'm not leaving. I promised you I wouldn't leave and I'm keeping that promise. You hear me, Daniel? You're going to be okay. At the hospital, they were rushed into the emergency room. Doctors and nurses swarmed around them. I tried to follow but a nurse stopped me. Are you family? She asked in Korean. I didn't understand the words but I understood the tone. The security guard who had arrived with the police translated. She's asking if you're related to the children. No, I said, my voice breaking. I'm there. I work for their father. But I'm the one who found them. I'm the one who saved them. Please, please let me stay with them. They're scared. They need someone they know. The translator spoke to the nurse. There was a discussion. Finally, the nurse nodded and gestured for me to follow. They took Daniel and Sophia to separate trauma bays. I could only be in one place, so I stood in the hallway between them, running back and forth, trying to be present for both of them. Daniel was conscious but barely. He kept trying to talk but his teeth were chattering too hard to form words. A doctor was checking his vital signs, his temperature, his heart rate. Severe hypothermia. I heard the doctor say in English. Core temperature 28.5 Celsius. We need to warm him slowly. Too fast and we risk cardiac arrest. In the other bay, Sophia wasn't conscious at all. Her body temperature had dropped even lower than Daniel's. 27.2. A nurse called out. Doctors were surrounding her. Doing things I didn't understand, shouting orders in Korean. I stood in that hallway and prayed. I'm not particularly religious, but in that moment, I prayed to every god I had ever heard of. Please let them live. Please don't let these children die. Please. I'll do anything. I'll give anything. Just please let them survive this. Minjun arrived about 40 minutes later. I heard him before I saw him. His voice cutting through the hospital chaos, demanding to know where his children were. He came around the corner at almost a run, flanked by two men in dark suits who were clearly bodyguards, and when he saw me standing there covered in blood and freezer frost, he stopped. Where are they? He demanded. Daniel is in there, I pointed. Sophia is there. They're being treated for severe hypothermia. They were in a freezer. Isabella locked them in a freezer. His face transformed. For just a moment, I saw past the cold, dangerous crime lord to the terrified father underneath. How long? I don't know exactly. Maybe 20 minutes before I found them? Then maybe 10 more minutes before I could get them out. The police were there. Isabella had a gun. It was, my voice broke. Minjun didn't wait for me to finish. He strode into Daniel's trauma bay. I heard him speaking Korean, his voice low and urgent. I heard Daniel's small voice responding. And I heard something I hadn't expected to hear from a man like Minjun. I heard him crying. 2 hours later, they moved Daniel and Sophia to the pediatric intensive care unit. Their body temperatures had stabilized. They were going to live. The doctor who spoke English came to explain to me and Minjun what the next days would look like. They were very lucky, he said. If they had been in that freezer even 15 minutes longer, we would be having a very different conversation. As it is, they will recover. But there may be some tissue damage to extremities, fingers, toes. We won't know the full extent for several days. And psychologically, children who experience this kind of trauma will need extensive therapy. They will have nightmares. They may develop anxiety disorders, PTSD. This is not something they will just get over. Minjun listened in silence. When the doctor finished, he asked in careful English, "Can I see them?" "Yes. But they need rest. Try not to disturb them too much." Minjun went into Sophia's room first. I watched through the window as he sat beside her bed and took her small hand in his. His shoulders were shaking. He was crying again, this powerful, dangerous man who probably hadn't cried since he was a child himself. When he came out 30 minutes later, his face was composed again, the mask back in place. But his eyes were different. Something had broken in him. Or maybe something had finally opened. "Thank you," he said to me. His voice was rough. "The police told me what you did. How you broke down the door. How you stood between them and Isabella. How you called for help even though it could cost you your job, your visa, everything. You saved my children's lives." "I did what anyone should have done," I said. "No," he said firmly. "You did what almost no one would have done. You risked everything. You didn't have to. They're not your children. You could have pretended not to hear. You could have stayed out of it. But you didn't. You chose them over your own safety. Why?" I thought about that question. I thought about Maria and Lucas so far away. I thought about Daniel asking me to promise not to leave. I thought about Sophia showing me the hidden photograph of her mother. I thought about what it means to love children, whether they're yours by blood or by choice. "Because they needed someone," I said simply. "Because they deserved to be saved. Because I couldn't live with myself if I had stayed silent and they had died. Because some things are more important than keeping your job or staying safe. Some things are worth any cost." Minjun looked at me for a long moment. "I owe you a debt I can never repay," he said finally. "But I will try. Whatever you need. Whatever you want. It's yours." "I don't want anything from you," I said. "I just want to know that Daniel and Sophia will be safe. That Isabella will never be able to hurt them again. That's all I want." "Isabella is in police custody," Minjun said. And his voice was cold in a way that made me understand exactly what kind of man he was. "She will never hurt anyone again. I will make sure of that." I stayed at the hospital for 3 days. I barely slept. I barely ate. I just moved between Daniel's room and Sophia's room, sitting with them, talking to them when they were awake, holding their hands when they were asleep. Daniel woke up fully on the second day. His first words were, "Where's Sophia? Is she okay?" "She's in the next room," I told him. "She's going to be okay. You're both going to be okay." "I knew you would come," he said, his voice hoarse. "I told Sophia you would save us. I told her to hold on because you promised you wouldn't leave, and I knew you would keep your promise." I had to turn away because I was crying too hard to let him see. Sophia took longer to wake up. But on the third day, her eyes opened. She looked around the hospital room in confusion and fear. Then she saw me sitting beside her bed, and something in her face relaxed. "Grace," she whispered. It was only the third or fourth time she had spoken my name directly. "I'm here, baby," I said, taking her hand. "You're safe now. You're in the hospital. You're going to be okay. Daniel. He's in the next room. He's okay too. He's been asking about you constantly." She closed her eyes and tears slipped down her cheeks. I was so cold. I couldn't feel my hands. I thought we were going to die. "But you didn't die," I said firmly. "You survived. You're strong. You're so strong. And you're never going to be locked in that freezer again. Never. I promise you." She held onto my hand like it was the only solid thing in the universe. The trial began 3 months after the incident. Those 3 months were a strange suspended time. Daniel and Sophia recovered physically. The doctors had been right. There was some minor tissue damage to their fingers and toes, but nothing permanent, nothing that would limit their lives. Psychologically was another story. Both children had nightmares every night. Both had panic attacks when they got cold. Both refused to go anywhere near the basement of the house. Both were in therapy 3 times a week. Isabella had been denied bail. She was considered a flight risk and a danger. She sat in a jail cell while lawyers prepared her defense and prosecutors built their case. I gave my testimony to the prosecutors 7 times before the trial even started. They wanted every detail. What I had seen. What I had heard. The exact timeline. Isabella's threats to me. The children's reports of abuse. Everything. This is going to be difficult. The lead prosecutor warned me. The defense attorney is going to try to paint you as a jealous maid who fabricated this entire story, because Isabella was cruel to you. They're going to attack your character. They're going to bring up every mistake you've ever made. They're going to try to make the jury doubt you. I know, I said. But I'm telling the truth. That has to matter. It does matter, she said. But truth isn't always enough. We need the evidence. And we have it. The security footage. The freezer with the padlock. The children's testimony. Your testimony. The police body camera footage showing Isabella with the gun. The medical reports. We have everything we need. But you need to be prepared for them to be cruel to you on the stand. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. Media from all over Korea and even international press. This was a sensational story. The beautiful fiancé of a crime boss trying to murder his children, stopped by a brave domestic worker. It was the kind of story that newspapers love. Minjun sat in the front row every single day. His face a mask of controlled fury. Daniel and Sophia were not in the courtroom. They were too young, and the prosecution didn't want to traumatize them further by making them face Isabella in person. But they had given video depositions that would be shown to the jury. Isabella sat at the defense table looking completely different from the glamorous woman I had met on my first day. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore minimal makeup. She wore a modest dress instead of designer clothes. Her lawyers had clearly coached her on how to present herself. Less like a wealthy socialite, more like a woman who had made a tragic mistake. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. They showed the security footage from the day of the incident. Isabella dragging the children toward the basement, me trying to intervene, the basement door closing. They showed photographs of the industrial freezer with its heavy padlock. They showed the police body camera footage of me breaking open the freezer door and pulling out 2 barely conscious children. They showed Isabella standing there with the gun. They brought in medical experts who testified about hypothermia, about how close Daniel and Sophia had come to death, about the lasting psychological damage. They brought in the police officers who had responded to my 911 call, who had arrested Isabella, who had taken her gun. They brought in the hospital doctors who had treated Daniel and Sophia. And then they called me to the stand. I walked up there in my best clothes, a simple black dress, modest and respectful, and I swore to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. The prosecutor asked me to tell my story from the beginning. So I did. I talked about arriving in Korea, about meeting Isabella and being given the list of rules, about meeting Daniel and Sophia, about watching Isabella's cruelty escalate over weeks, about her threats to deport me if I interfered, about the day I heard the children screaming, about breaking down the basement door, about finding them in the freezer, about refusing to leave even when Isabella had a gun pointed at me. I spoke for almost 2 hours. The courtroom was completely silent except for my voice. Then the defense attorney stood up for cross-examination. He was an expensive lawyer, the kind who defended wealthy criminals. He wore an expensive suit. He had silver hair and cold eyes and the demeanor of someone who enjoyed destroying people on the witness stand. "Miss Williams," he began, his tone deceptively gentle. "You came to Korea because you needed money, correct?" "Yes," I said. "You have children in America that you abandoned to take this job?" "I didn't abandon them," I said firmly. "I left them in the care of my mother so I could earn money to support them." "But you left them," he pressed. You chose money over being with your own children. The prosecutor objected. Relevance. I'm establishing the witness's character and motivations, the defense attorney said. The judge allowed it. I made a difficult choice to try to give my children a better life, I said. That's not abandonment. That's sacrifice. Sacrifice, he repeated. Interesting word. Now, Miss Williams, you had conflicts with Miss Martinez from the beginning, didn't you? She made it clear I was supposed to be invisible, I said. She gave you rules to follow. Rules you chose to break by spending time with the children against her explicit instructions. Correct. I spent time with Daniel and Sophia because they were lonely and scared, I said. Against your employer's explicit instructions, he repeated. Yes. So you disobeyed your employer. You went behind her back. You deliberately violated the terms of your employment. And when she confronted you about it, she told you she would report you to immigration authorities if you continued. Correct. Yes, I said, seeing where this was going. So you had a motive to hurt Miss Martinez, to get revenge on her for threatening your job, your visa, your ability to send money to the children you abandoned in America. Objection. The prosecutor stood up. Counsel is testifying instead of asking questions. Sustained, the judge said. Rephrase. The defense attorney smiled. Isn't it true, Miss Williams, that you were angry at Miss Martinez for threatening your employment? I was concerned for the children's safety, I said carefully. That's not what I asked. Were you angry at her? Yes, I admitted. I was angry that she was cruel to innocent children. Angry enough to fabricate a story about her locking those children in a freezer? I didn't fabricate anything, I said. Everything I've said is the truth. Is it? He asked. Or did you see an opportunity for revenge? Did you take advantage of a moment when Miss Martinez was upset, justifiably upset that her fiancé had forgotten their dinner plans, to manipulate the situation? To hurt the children yourself and blame it on Miss Martinez? I stared at him. That's insane. Why would I hurt children I love just to frame someone? Because you're not a rational person, Miss Williams. You abandoned your own children to work as a servant in a foreign country. You deliberately disobeyed your employer. You were facing deportation and the loss of your income. You were desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. The prosecutor was on her feet again. Objection. This is completely inappropriate. Counsel is harassing the witness. Sustained. Mr. Lee, stick to questions based on evidence. But the damage was done. The defense attorney had planted doubt. Had made me seem like a desperate, unstable woman who might have done anything. He continued for another hour trying to poke holes in my timeline, questioning why I hadn't called the police sooner, suggesting that I had somehow staged the entire thing. But he couldn't get around the security footage. He couldn't explain away the police body camera showing Isabella with a gun. He couldn't explain the medical evidence showing the children had nearly died from hypothermia. When I finally stepped down from the witness stand, I was exhausted. But I had told the truth. And the truth was on video. The truth was documented. The truth was undeniable. The defense's strategy became clear over the next days. They weren't denying that Isabella had locked the children in the freezer. They couldn't deny that. Instead, they argued temporary insanity. They brought in psychiatrists who testified that Isabella had been under extreme stress, that she had a history of trauma, that she wasn't thinking clearly, that she didn't intend to kill the children, just to teach them a lesson. It was a disgusting strategy, but it was the only strategy they had. The prosecution brought in their own psychiatrists who testified that Isabella's actions showed planning and intent, that she had deliberately locked a padlock on the freezer, that she had stood outside and refused to let me open it, that she had pulled a gun to prevent me from saving them. The jury watched Daniel's video deposition. In it, he calmly and clearly described the months of abuse, the escalating cruelty, the day Isabella dragged them to the basement. The jury members were visibly emotional watching this brave 8-year-old boy describe the terror of being trapped in a freezer, watching his sister lose consciousness, thinking they were both going to die. The jury watched Sophia's video deposition. She spoke more hesitantly, but her testimony was equally powerful. She described the cold, the fear, the moment she stopped feeling her hands and feet, the moment she thought she was dying. The defense had no real response to the children's testimony. How do you cross-examine children who nearly froze to death? After 6 days of testimony, both sides rested. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. In the matter of the attempted murder of Daniel Park and Sophia Park, we find the defendant, Isabella Martinez, guilty as charged. The courtroom erupted. Minjun closed his eyes and bowed his head. I sat in the back row and cried with relief. Isabella showed no emotion. She just sat there stone-faced as the judge read her sentence. Isabella Martinez, you have been found guilty of 2 counts of attempted murder, 2 counts of child endangerment, and 1 count of assault with a deadly weapon. I am sentencing you to 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. You deliberately and with premeditation endangered the lives of 2 innocent children. You are fortunate they survived. If they had not, you would be facing a much longer sentence. This court believes you are a danger to society and especially to children. You will serve your full sentence. Bailiff, please remand the defendant to custody. As officers led Isabella away, she looked back at me one time. Not with remorse. Not with regret. Just with pure cold hatred. The look of someone who had lost everything and blamed everyone but herself. I looked back at her without flinching. I had won. The children had won. Justice had won. 3 months after the trial ended, Grace was packing her things. She had saved enough money. More than enough. Between her salary and a substantial settlement from Minjun for what she endured, emotional trauma, physical harm, lost wages, she had enough to go home. To see her children. She hadn't seen Maria and Lucas in 2 years and 4 months. They had grown. They had changed. They were different people than the children she had left behind. And she was terrified she wouldn't know them. That they wouldn't know her. That the bond would have broken too much under the weight of distance and time. But she had to try. Before she left, Minjun asked to speak with her. They sat in the garden. The same garden where Grace used to take Daniel and Sophia to read. The same garden where she felt the first stirrings of love for these 2 children who weren't hers but became hers. I owe you my children's lives, Minjun said. His voice was quiet. Humble. I don't know how to repay that. You don't owe me anything, Grace said. I did what anyone should do. No, Minjun said. His eyes were wet. You did more than that. You risked everything. You stood up against someone I loved. You sacrificed your safety for theirs. That's not something anyone does. That's something only a truly good person does. He paused. Grace could see something shifting in his face. Something vulnerable. Something that wasn't there before. The children ask about you every day, he continued. Even though you're still here, they ask when they can see you. Daniel told me he wants to be like you when he grows up. He wants to be someone who helps people. Even when it's hard. He wants to be brave like you. Grace felt tears coming. But these were different tears. Healing tears. Tears of completion. I'm going to miss them so much, she said. Will you come back? Minjun asked. His voice was small. Almost hopeful. Grace looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw a man who was lost in the wrong relationship. A man who is learning what matters. A man who is learning to see the person in front of him. A man who is learning that quiet strength is more beautiful than flashy beauty. A man who is learning to love differently. I will, she said. When I'm ready. When my children. When I've done what I need to do for them. When I've healed from what happened here. I'll come back. Minjun nodded. He understood. He was learning about sacrifice. He was learning that the people we love most are worth waiting for. That evening, Grace spent time with Daniel and Sophia. She told them she was going home. She told them she was going to see her children. Will you come back? Sophia asked, her voice small and frightened. She had learned that the people you love leave. She had learned not to trust permanence. Yes, Grace said firmly. I promise. I will always come back for you. You are my children too. Not by blood but by choice. And that's more powerful than blood. She hugged them so tight it hurt. She knew that this moment, this goodbye, would be one of the most important moments of her life. Because it was a promise. It was a commitment. It was saying to these children, you matter. You are worth coming back for. Daniel whispered in her ear. You're the bravest person I know. You're like a superhero. Grace laughed through her tears. I'm not a superhero, Daniel. I'm just someone who loved you enough to do the right thing. And sometimes that's all a superhero really is. Just someone who loved enough to be brave. The next morning, Grace got on an airplane. She was going home to Atlanta. To her children. To the other half of her heart. As the plane took off, she looked out at the city of Seoul disappearing below. She thought about Isabella in a prison cell. She thought about Minjun raising his children with more awareness now, more gratitude. She thought about Daniel and Sophia, who would grow up knowing they were fought for. Who would grow up knowing they were loved. And she thought about herself. About the choice she had made in that basement. She didn't regret it. She never would. 1 year after the trial, I stood in front of a small office building in Seoul, looking up at the sign. Grace's Sanctuary of Support for Domestic Workers. It had taken a year to build, but it was real. With Minjun's financial backing and legal support, I had created a foundation to help domestic workers facing abuse, exploitation, and injustice. We had a small staff, 3 full-time counselors, 2 lawyers who worked on immigration and labor cases, a medical professional who could provide basic health care, and me as the director. We had helped 43 women in the first 6 months. Women from the Philippines, Indonesia, Cambodia, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Myanmar. Women who had been abused by their employers. Women who hadn't been paid. Women who had been threatened with deportation. Women who had nowhere else to turn. Some days were overwhelming. Some days I heard stories that broke my heart all over again. But some days I got to watch women reclaim their power, get justice, escape dangerous situations, reunite with their children. Maria and Lucas were with me now. Minjun had helped me get them visas. They were enrolled in international school. They were learning Korean. They were adjusting to life in a new country. It wasn't always easy, but we were together again. That was what mattered. Daniel and Sophia were thriving. They still had nightmares sometimes. They were still in therapy. But they were laughing again. They were playing again. They were being children again. And Minjun had changed. He still ran his business, but he had stepped back from the most dangerous aspects. He spent more time with his children. He had become a different kind of father. One evening, about 14 months after the trial, Minjun asked me to dinner. Just the 2 of us. We went to a quiet restaurant overlooking the Han River. I've been wanting to ask you something, he said after we ordered. But I wanted to wait until I was sure. Until I had proven to you that I'm not the man I was when you first came to my house. What do you want to ask? I said, though I thought I knew. Would you consider building something with me? Not just as the director of Grace's Sanctuary. Not just as someone I'm grateful to, but as someone I care about deeply. Someone I've come to love. Someone I could see a future with. I looked at him. This powerful, dangerous man who had learned to be gentle. This absent father who had learned to be present. This person who had supported my dream of helping others even though it brought more attention to his family than he wanted. I need you to understand something, I said. Maria and Lucas will always come first. I will never choose anyone over my children again. Not even you. I wouldn't want you to, he said. I've learned that lesson. Your love for your children is one of the things I admire most about you. I don't want to replace that. I want to be part of it. For all 4 children. Yours and mine. I thought about that. About blending our families. About creating something new from the ashes of everything we'd both lost. Yes, I said. Yes, I would consider building something with you. But slowly. Carefully. In a way that protects all of our children. He smiled, and it was a real smile, not the cold mask he usually wore. Slowly and carefully sounds perfect. 2 years after the freezer incident, we gathered for a celebration. Daniel had won a national science competition. At 10 years old, he was already on track to become the doctor he dreamed of being. Sophia was in a school play, playing the lead role. The shy girl who hadn't spoken to strangers was now confident enough to perform on stage. Maria had been accepted into a prestigious arts program. Lucas had started a coding club at school. We all sat together at the dinner table. Daniel, Sophia, Maria, Lucas, Minjun, my mother who had come to visit, and me. 2 biological families that had become one chosen family. I want to make a toast, Daniel said, standing up with his juice glass. To Grace, who saved our lives, who taught us that family isn't just about blood, who showed us that love means choosing to stay even when it's hard, who is the bravest person I know. Everyone raised their glasses. I looked around at these people I loved, my children, my chosen children, my mother, and yes, Minjun too. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the impossible choices, the sacrifices, the pain, the healing. To family, I said. To the one we're born into and the one we create. To loving fiercely enough to change the world. To never staying silent when someone needs help. To courage. To hope. To healing. To grace, they all echoed. And for the first time in years I felt complete. Not because everything was perfect, but because we were together. Because we had survived. Because love had won. Grace returned to Seoul 6 months after her first visit home. She did not take the job with the wealthy family again. Instead, with Minjun's support, she started a foundation called Grace's Sanctuary to help domestic workers facing abuse and exploitation. Daniel and Sophia thrived under their father's changed leadership. In school, they became advocates for children's rights. Both of them went on to study law, wanting to prosecute the cases of children like themselves who had no one to fight for them. Isabella remains in prison, serving her 30-year sentence. She was denied parole after her first hearing. And Grace learned that the bravest thing we can do is not save ourselves. It's save someone else, even when it costs us everything. Because that's when we discover who we really are. Love is not a luxury. It's a survival mechanism. And some of us are called to love so fiercely that we change the world.